Starting the introduction, and prior to that a reminder bi-idhnillah. As I'm sure that everyone is aware, yesterday the 12th of Rabi' al-Awwal, and so the birth of the Prophet ﷺ, according to the majority of the scholars, they take the opinion that the Prophet ﷺ was born on the 12th of Rabi' al-Awwal. And so we see that there are large parts of our ummah that are celebrating the Mawlid of the Prophet ﷺ, and there are large parts of our ummah who are not celebrating the Mawlid of the Prophet ﷺ. And as per usual, we see that both parties start to argue with each other, and they start to refute each other and fight with each other, and in doing so they leave off the prophetic way. Those celebrating the Prophet ﷺ, they leave off the way of the Prophet ﷺ in attacking and slandering and abusing and backbiting and refuting the Muslims that are not celebrating the Mawlid of the Prophet ﷺ, and those that are not celebrating it, they leave off the prophetic way by attacking and refuting and slandering and so on and so forth. And we have to look at the Mawlid of the Prophet ﷺ, and we have to put it into context. The practice or the celebration of the Prophet ﷺ's birthday is something which has been done historically by great scholars and Imams from our ummah. Likewise, not practicing or celebrating the Mawlid of the Prophet ﷺ is something which has been done by great scholars of our ummah and Imams of our ummah. On both sides you have scholars and mountains and Imams, and they either allow or they practice the Mawlid, or they disallow and don't practice the Mawlid based upon their perception of the evidences for and against. And many individuals, they fall into the mistake of arguing about the matter of innovation in regards to the Mawlid. Some will say this is not an innovation, others will say this is an innovation, and those who don't practice it will start saying those people are innovators, this is an innovation, etc., not realizing that they are not practicing an innovation. They don't say to themselves, we're going to practice an innovation here, the Mawlid of the Prophet ﷺ, let's innovate something on this day. No, that's not how it works. The difference of opinion between the two parties is what constitutes for an innovation. What is an innovation? And so those that say the Mawlid is not something to be celebrated because the companions never celebrated it, the others that do celebrate it will say that is not the reason why we see that it is permissible or something which is recommended, and so on and so forth. And likewise, those that do celebrate it start to attack the others, saying you have no love for the Prophet ﷺ, and so on and so forth. But the reality is, those who do not practice the Mawlid are doing so because they see that this is what the Prophet ﷺ would have wanted from them. Therefore, their abstaining from practicing the Mawlid comes from a place of love. And so we have to look at it. We have to sometimes take a perspectives look at what is going on. Two parties, both parties from the party of the believers, both parties either celebrating the Mawlid or not celebrating the Mawlid based upon what they see is most preferable to the Prophet ﷺ and to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Both parties, their actions stem from love. Both parties, they have ulama and imams and giants that are with them, both past and contemporary. Therefore, we should refrain from placing our tongues where our tongues should not be. And when you look at the scholars of the past, the scholars of Insaf, the scholars who were balanced in their approach, they had a moderate approach to these issues of ijtihad, you will find that they would make excuses for those that they differed with. Al-Dhahabi rahimahullah, in his famous book Sir A'lam al-Nubala, when he discusses issues which he perceives to be issues of innovation, he says, when you see people practicing these innovative things, make excuses for them. Why? Because they are doing so out of their love for the deen, out of their love for Allah, out of their love for the Prophet ﷺ. And again, I say what he perceives, because in the issue of innovation, in the issue of practices, there is a perspective, and that perspective is based upon principles of ijtihad. How do we come to our conclusions? You will find that the madhahib, they differ. You will find the groups of Islam, mainstream groups of Islam, they differ. And so we have to be understanding, and we have to appreciate, and we have to respect. And when we do not do so, we end up leaving the prophetic way. We end up doing something haram in the name of doing something which is sunnah. We end up attacking, slandering, backbiting, and so on and so forth, looking down. The Prophet ﷺ, he said that it is enough of a sin for a person to enter Jahannam that he looks down upon his brother. And a person who practices the Mawlid or a person who doesn't practice the Mawlid looks at the other with an eye of mockery or an eye of looking down or an eye of being higher than that particular person or group. That in of itself is a sin and it's haram. So we have to learn to follow the Prophet ﷺ and follow him in all aspects of our lives, not just in that which we make apparent. And if there was ever a time for us to leave off arguing and bickering and slandering and attacking other groups of Islam in the name of following the Prophet ﷺ, this is the time to do so. If there was ever a time for those who do not see that practicing the Mawlid is something which should be done, if there was ever a time for them to be lenient in celebrating the Prophet ﷺ and his birthday, etc., then now is the time to be more lenient. Why? Because we see that a head of a main nation state is attacking our beloved Prophet ﷺ. And then you have individuals, you have scholars, you have parties, you have groups that want to celebrate his birth. So rather than focus our attention on those celebrating his birth, why not focus our attention on those that are trying to detract from the Prophet ﷺ? Why not become constructive in the way that we deal with things? And being constructive means doing something positive which will lead to a positive change within society. Attacking other people does not lead to a positive change. That was not the way of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ did not slander. He did not attack. He did not abuse. Those that abused him, he overlooked and he forgave. There were only a few individuals that the Prophet ﷺ did not forgive. We need to follow the way of the Prophet ﷺ. And we need to understand our heritage. One of the biggest problems of our time today is a lack of understanding our heritage, our traditions. We have a shallow approach to knowledge. We attack parties today for actions that they do, not knowing that the ulama who we may take from today took from imams who viewed those things being done today as permissible or mustahab, recommended. The likes of As-Suyuti, the likes of An-Nawawi, the likes of As-Sakhawi, the likes of As-Subki, and so on and so forth. So we have to understand that we do not understand, as was said previously. Understand that we do not understand, know that we do not know, and remain quiet in issues that we are not qualified to speak in. I am not qualified to speak as a doctor, so I will never speak about anything to do with medicine. And if I did, I would come out with strange opinions and strange things and strange views. The educated onlooker will see my ignorance immediately. Likewise in Islam, if we are not qualified to speak, then we should not speak. It doesn't matter what is being discussed. If we see something as being an innovation or not being an innovation, unless we're qualified to speak, then we should not speak. Especially in a time of confusion, because all we do, we add to the confusion. We add to the darkness. We add to the problems that we're facing. As Imam Shakil mentioned, a young Muslim was murdered last night, a few areas away. And yet as our ummah, and this is not a one-off situation, you find this happening all over the place. The problems that we're facing as a nation, but yet you'll find that individuals from our ummah or groups from our ummah are still arguing about the same things every single year. Every single month there's something to argue about. Where are we heading? Where are we leading ourselves to? We need to be mature, emotionally, mentally and spiritually, and mature enough to deal with each other as believers, to see each other as believers, not to see each other as individuals that belong to theological groups. No, we belong to the party of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger, inshaAllah. And we should respect each other, love each other, help each other, aid each other, guide each other, educate each other as believers, nothing else. That's the way of the companions. If we would like to follow the companions, that's their way. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala facilitate for us education and guidance, and make us facilitators of education and guidance. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless His Prophet and send His salutations upon him and the companions all together collectively. And after the salah, as was mentioned, we'll be resuming the ihya class inshaAllah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.